On the morning of April 18, 1988, the Iranian frigate Sahand burned from bow to stern in the Persian Gulf, her magazines cooking off in the heat, black smoke climbing thousands of feet into a clear sky. By sunset, the United States Navy had sunk or crippled roughly half of Iran's operational surface fleet, destroyed 2 fortified oil platforms, and scattered a swarm of Revolutionary Guard speedboats. It took about 8 hours. Not one American was killed by enemy fire. It remains the largest surface engagement the U.S. Navy has fought since the Second World War, and it is taught, correctly, as a masterpiece of planning and execution. Now look at the Strait of Hormuz today. It is closed. 2 carrier strike groups, an aerial campaign, and a naval blockade have not reopened it, and the ships that are keeping it shut are not frigates. They are speedboats, mines, and missiles fired from the beach. This is the autopsy of Operation Praying Mantis, and the finding is going to be uncomfortable because the operation did not fail. It succeeded so completely that it built the problem the U.S. Navy is still trying to solve. To understand how, you have to start in a war that most people have forgotten. Between 1980 and 1988, Iran and Iraq killed something close to 1 million people in a conflict that eventually spilled out of the trenches and into the water. It was called the Tanker War. Iraq began attacking ships carrying Iranian oil. Iran, unable to reach Iraq's own coastline in any meaningful way, retaliated against the countries funding Baghdad, which meant Kuwait. By 1987, Kuwaiti tankers were being hit with rockets, gunfire, and mines. So Kuwait did something clever. It asked both the United States and the Soviet Union for protection, knowing perfectly well that Washington would not tolerate Soviet warships escorting Gulf oil. It worked. In July 1987, the United States began Operation Earnest Will, reflagging 11 Kuwaiti tankers under American colors and escorting them up and down the Gulf. The message was simple: touch these ships and you are touching the United States. Iran did not fight that message head-on. It could not. Instead, it laid mines. Mines are the perfect weapon for a weaker navy, cheap, invisible, patient, and deniable. In September 1987, American helicopters caught the Iranian vessel Iran Ajr in the act of laying them, and U.S. forces seized the ship along with its remaining mines. Those mines were photographed. Their serial numbers were recorded. Remember that detail, because it is what turned the next event from an accident into a war. At about 4:50 in the afternoon on April 14, 1988, the guided missile frigate USS Samuel B was returning from an escort run in the Central Gulf when her lookout spotted 3 mines floating in clear water directly ahead. Captain Paul Rinn ordered the ship stopped and began backing carefully out along the exact track she had come in on. She struck a 4th mine nobody had seen. The explosion lifted the 4,000-ton frigate out of the water, tore a hole roughly 15 feet across in her hull, flooded the engine room, cracked her keel, and set fires burning toward the magazines. By every reasonable expectation, the Samuel B. Roberts should have gone to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. She did not, because her crew spent the next 5 hours doing what damage control teams train for and almost never have to do. They fought the fires with the ship's back broken. They wrapped steel cables around the superstructure and tightened them to physically hold the hull together. 10 sailors were wounded. Not one died. The ship was towed to Dubai and then carried home on a heavy lift barge, and in the photographs of her in dry dock you can see daylight through her side. And when American divers went back into that patch of water, they found more mines. The serial numbers matched the ones taken off the Iran Ajr 7 months earlier. There was no ambiguity, no plausible deniability, and no argument left to have. The response was authorized within days, and here is where the operation becomes worth studying. It was not rage, it was arithmetic. American planners deliberately built a package that was proportionate and escalation controlled. The primary targets were not cities, not the Iranian mainland, not even warships. They were 2 offshore oil platforms, Sassan and Sirri, which Iran had converted into military posts, radar sites, and coordination centers for attacks on shipping. 3 surface action groups were assigned. Bravo would take Sassan, with Marines embarked on the amphibious ship USS Trenton. Charlie would take Sirri. Delta would wait in reserve, watching for the Iranian frigate Sabalan, a ship American commanders particularly wanted, because her captain had a reputation for machine gunning the crew quarters of merchant vessels he had already stopped. Overhead sat the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise with carrier Air Wing 11, and the rules of engagement contained something almost unheard of in a retaliatory strike. Warn them first. Before the shooting began, American ships radioed the platforms and gave the men on them roughly 20 minutes to get into their boats and leave. At Sassan, most of them did. One gun crew stayed at a 23mm anti-aircraft mount and kept firing at the destroyers shelling them. A Marine Cobra helicopter put a TOW missile into the platform. When the guns finally went silent, Marines from the Trenton fast roped down, collected intelligence off the surviving equipment, and set demolition charges. At Sirri, the shelling touched off a fuel tank and the entire structure went up in a column of flames so intense that the Marines waiting to board simply could not land on it. Both platforms were finished within a few hours of dawn. Then, Iran did the thing that decided the day. It came out to fight conventionally. The missile boat Joshan came at Surface Action Group Charlie. She was warned repeatedly by radio to turn away. Instead, she launched a Harpoon anti-ship missile at the cruiser USS Wainwright. The missile ran true and hit nothing, defeated by chaff. The American answer took about a minute. 4 missiles from USS Simpson, 1 from Wainwright, and a Harpoon from USS Bagley. Joshan was cut apart and went under. Iranian F-4 Phantoms came in behind her and were driven off by missiles from Wainwright, one of them limping back to Bandar Abbas with a wing full of holes. Then, Sahand sortied and fired on A-6 intruders from the Enterprise. The intruders came back with harpoons, laser-guided skipper bombs, and cluster munitions. USS Joseph Strauss added another harpoon. Sahand burned, her own ammunition finished her, and she sank. Her sister ship Sabalan came out a few hours later and fired surface-to-air missiles at an A-6. The A-6's crew put a laser-guided bomb straight down her stack. She went dead in the water, on fire, helpless. And then the United States stopped. With Sabalan crippled and the intruders circling to finish her, Secretary of Defense Frank Carlucci gave the order to let her go. An Iranian tug came out and towed the wreck of Sabalan back to port. This is the part that gets left out of the highlight reels. The operation ended not because the United States ran out of targets, but because it decided it had made its point. That is not weakness. That is exactly what escalation control looks like when it works. The ledger for April 18, 1988. Iran lost the frigate Sahand, the missile boat Joshan, the frigate Sabalan as a fighting ship, 6 Revolutionary Guard speedboats, 2 oil platforms, and more than 50 men killed. The United States lost 1 helicopter, an AH-1T Sea Cobra that went into the water at night during a search flight, killing Captain Stephen Leslie and Captain Kenneth Hill. Not shot down. Almost certainly disorientation in the dark over featureless water. Within 4 months, Ayatollah Khomeini accepted the ceasefire that ended the war between Iran and Iraq and said publicly that agreeing to it was more deadly to him than drinking poison. Praying Mantis was not the only reason, but it was on the scale. The operation had done what it was designed to do at almost no cost, with restraint, against a target set chosen for proportionality. If you want a textbook, this is the textbook. So here is the autopsy. In the weeks after April 18th, Iranian planners sat down with the same data everyone else had and drew the only rational conclusion available to them. We cannot do this. Not now, not in 10 years, not ever. A conventional navy that fights the United States Navy in open water gets deleted in an afternoon, and the deletion is not close. And so, according to analysts at the United States Institute of Peace, Iran concluded after Praying Mantis that its maritime forces would never be effective in a straight force-on-force fight, and the Revolutionary Guard Navy built an entirely different doctrine instead, one designed around avoiding direct engagement at sea altogether. No more frigates trading missiles with cruisers. Instead, hundreds of small fast boats that cost less than a single American missile. Mines by the thousand. Anti-ship missiles fired from truck beds parked behind coastal hills. Midget submarines in shallow water where a destroyer's sonar drowns in noise. Nothing to sink that is worth a harpoon. Nothing to blockade. Nothing to line up in the crosshairs at all. It is the naval equivalent of refusing to stand up. That doctrine is not a museum piece. It is the thing that is closing the Strait of Hormuz right now, in 2026, against the most powerful fleet ever assembled. And every element of it was designed, deliberately and intelligently, by men who had watched what happened to the alternative on one clear morning in April 1988. Which brings us to the finding, and it is not the one anyone wants. Operation Praying Mantis did not fail. There is no incompetence in this file, no arrogant general, no ignored warning. It was well planned, proportionately executed, and restrained. At the moment, restraint was hardest. The problem is subtler and much harder to fix, because it is not a mistake at all. A defeat that total does not teach your enemy to give up. It teaches him to stop playing your game. Every weapon you demonstrate is a weapon he will never build. Every strength you display is a strength he will design his way around. The Sahand burned so that the speedboat swarm could be born. And the swarm is a weapon the Sahand's killers still have no clean answer to, 38 years later. Cause of death: winning two completely. If you want more autopsies of history's worst military decisions, subscribe to Battle Autopsy. Next on the table, the amphibious raid that was a total failure and was supposed to be. Thanks for watching.